Hi guys, welcome back. In today's video, we are checking out AMD's top dog of the first gen Ryzen processors, the 1800X. But first, picture the scene. The year is 2017. Desktop CPU market is stale and oversaturated with hyper-threaded 4-core processors. Intel just released their 7th gen Kaby Lake, and, as we've been told for the last 6 generations, 4 cores is all you need. Well, I don't think they were quite ready for what Lisa Su and the engineers at AMD had in store. Claimed as the fastest 8-core desktop processor, the 1800X promised strong performance for gamers and content creators, at half the price of competing Intel chips.
The best starts now.
Strong claims. Let's dive in and check out the specs. The flagship Ryzen 7 1800X launched in March 2017 with an MSRP of $499. Manufactured on 40nm process, it came with 8 cores and 16 threads. Those cores are running at 3.6 GHz base clock and underload, boosting up to 4 on some of them. It has TDP of 95 watts and fits into the now legendary AM4 socket. Memory support officially tops up a DDR4 speed of 2666, and CPU will offer 16 PCIe Gen 3 lanes. Today's testing was done by using Asus ROG Strix B350F gaming motherboard, fitted with 16GB of Corsair's Vengeance LPX memory running at 2933. As always, the HI50i looks after the temps, and the RTX 3080 ensures that our CPU is the bottleneck. Before benchmarks, let's talk overclocking and power consumption. And even though the 1800X is fully unlocked, there is not much overhead left, and even out of the box, the CPU is pretty much near its limits, so the only overclock applied today was to force all of them cores to run at 4 GHz. At stock, the total system power draw at idle was just 80 watts, jumping to 198 watts under full CPU load. With all cores at 4 GHz, idle rose to 89 watts and full load hit 231 watts. Right, first up, Cinebench R23. At stock, single thread performance scored 939 points, a huge jump from AMD's old FX lineup, but not quite on par with heavily overclocked 2nd or 3rd gen Intel i7s. At least 4 GHz then pushed the single thread score to under 1000 points. Multi-threaded testing is where the 1800X really shines, scoring 9075 points at stock and nearly 9700 points with the overclock. What a beast of a CPU. In 7-zip, the 1800X outperforms everything old I've tested up until this point. Not sure why, but check out the bigger than usual difference between the weaker compression and a stronger decompression result. How good is the 1800X in Blender? Well, the car demo rendered in 4 minutes and 11 seconds at stock speed, leaving the older high-end i7s in dust. With the 4 GHz overclock applied, we cut nearly another 30 seconds off, which puts the old flagship nearly head-to-head with the much newer Ryzen 5 5600. To test 1800X's encode capabilities, I'm using Handbrake with a 10GB 4K video file and using a 1080p 30 preset. At stock, this took 14 minutes and 49 seconds. With the overclock, I shaved off nearly another minute. Right, on the whole, I think those were more than respectable results. It's quite obvious that having 8 cores and 16 threads benefits productivity. I'm really looking forward to see how it stacks when I eventually test some newer Intel processors. With productivity test over, let's move on to game benchmarks. Our first stop is F1 2018 with ultra high settings at the Japan circuit. Stock 1800X pushed 151 FPS on average with 1% lows at 103, a performance that is pretty much on par with a bone stock 3770K. To make matters worse, the all-core 4 GHz overclock pushed negligible improvements to averages. Ouch. I'm not sure how, but stock performance in Dirt Rally seems even worse than in F1 2018. 1800X pushed 120 FPS on average, once again matching to a 3077K. At least, with 4 GHz overclock we see a 25% uplift to averages. Nothing like losing to a second gen's 2700K. DeusEx Mankind divided, so only OK-ish CPU utilization at around 50%. Stock 1800X was good for 102 FPS on average, making it about 9% slower than a stock 3770K. 4 GHz did bump up averages by a very small margin, however, still not good enough to beat even a stock 3770K. It's not looking good for this first gen Ryzen flagship, is it? Forza Horizon 4 using Ultra preset next. Stock 1800X delivered 129 FPS on average, with 1% lows at 98. Yes! We finally have some edge over the dreaded 3rd gen i7. But as happy as I was to finally see this, when we look at the overclocked results, it's quite obvious the 1800X comes nearly at its limits straight out of the box, unlike with the older Intel chips where a good overclock can squeeze a lot of extra performance. Shadow of the Tomb Raider loves lots of CPU cores. At stock speed, I saw 109 FPS on average with 1% lows at 50. All-core 4 GHz overclock pushed average FPS by a decent 8%, but it still remained behind the mighty 2nd and 3rd gen i7s. Well, as you can see, not much changes in Rainbow Six Siege, and 1800X continues to deliver performance that's really not impressive. Far Cry 6 with Ultra preset next. Stock 1800X pushed 73 FPS on average and 1% lows at 50. With all cores at 4 GHz, we are finally closing the gap and comparable to a 2nd or 3rd gen i7 CPUs. Yay! And the last game we tested is of course Cyberpunk 2077. Using high settings with no upscaling, stock 1800X squeezed 92 FPS on average, only falling short of the heavily overclocked 2700K by a small margin. I would argue that the much better 1% low swayed to Ryzen as a victory. At 4 GHz, we see a 5% uplift to average FPS and performance matching to an overclocked 3770K. I think it's high time to wrap it up. Where do I even start? Okay, the top dog of AMD's 1st gen Ryzen processors did not impress in games. There is no denying in feeling somewhat disappointed to see the 1800X being beaten time and time by a flipping 2nd gen i7 processor that came out in 2011. Next, the non-existing overclock. It's not that much of a deal, after all, a lot of people are not happy to fiddle around with voltages and prefer a solid out-of-the-box performance. But part of me wishes it would have a little more to give, just a little more. Outside of gaming, the 1800X turns into an absolute beast of a processor. 8 cores and 16 threads shred production workloads, unprecedented at this price point. And it's not just about the sheer core count. 1st gen Ryzen was a lot more power efficient than any of its predecessors. Love it or hate it, this is where the AM4 laid its strong foundations, and as we can see nowadays, it's absolutely disrupted the CPU market. Have you ever owned one of these? Be sure to let me know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.